Hey, lots going on in the Middle East. Joining us now to sort it all out, Dr. John Duke Anthony. And he is the founding president and chief executive officer of the National Council on U.S.-Arab Relations. He's an author of many books. He's been in the Middle East many times. He knows what's going on, and he's joining us now to sort this whole mess out. Dr. John Duke Anthony, good to have you with us.
Well, it's good to be back with you again, John.
Now, I got to let everybody know that John Duke Anthony was a baseball player back in the day, and gave me a little tour of his home, and I saw his baseball pictures. He was quite the hitter, quite the athlete back in the day, back then. And what I saw pictures of, you had Ted Williams and Ernie Banks and all that stuff. So
that's
pretty
right.
Interesting, right? So John Duke Anthony, baseball player means he can't be all bad. Let's go to the Saudis. What's going on? We got people in hotels that they can't get out. We've got the former prime minister, I guess the prime minister of Lebanon. He's somewhere in Saudi Arabia. Nobody can find him, but he says he's not abdicated, but we can't find him. And we just met him at the White House a few months ago. Well, what's going on?
Well, the little correction there, the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Saad al-Hariri, is leaving, or if he's not already left, Saudi Arabia for France. So he's either already arrived in France or he'll be there momentarily. And it's entirely possible from France that he can re-enter Beirut. Of course, he could have flown that directly, but the community in Lebanon has long, for almost 200 years, had an extraordinarily close relationship with France, especially the Christian community there. So the ties are close, and France is a likely place for him to go. France also aspires to a mediatory, conciliatory role in the region, so it fits there well. And thirdly, there's precedent for it. Very few people at the top of Lebanon's oligarchy have not been blessed by France overall, although increasingly the blesser is Damascus. Mm-hmm. And behind Damascus' blessing is Tehran's blessing. Mm-hmm. So there are these changes, but the rock-bottom relationship of France is still rock-bottom, although not as powerful as it once was. But that's why he's gone to France. As to Saudi Arabia, you mentioned the various princes and high-net-worth business people in the Ritz-Carlton in Riyadh. That's true. And to try to lend a note of levity or humor here, it's a place where quite a few of the members of who are there now wouldn't mind spending time. It's the most luxurious hotel I've ever set foot in the world.
Really?
Yes, from the outside it looks like about the White House multiplied by 4 in terms of its front facade. Mm-hmm. But inside it's enormous there. It's cavernous. So they're not hurting at all. And I can see situations where people have raved about it since it's been open there for three or 4 years, that they'll get around to visiting it or spending time in it eventually, but they're just too busy. Now they have the chance to relax at ease inside that opulent hotel. Right. So they're not hurting there. But go ahead and return to your main focus.
Well, now we understand that the Saudi government, right, there's potential regime change coming, but we've heard unconfirmed reports that Saudi officials that are holding some of those that are under Ritz-Carlton house arrest, if you will, for corruption are offering these oligarchs or whatever you want to call them, very rich men, they're offering them an opportunity to buy their freedom by turning over, 60, 70, 80% of their wealth in order to combat with their debt, the Saudi debt, the deficit, which has been created by the drop in oil prices. Is that true?
It again has another sense of humor to it, and if one thinks of creative financing, quote unquote, as oftentimes having humor laced within it, whether or not that will buy their freedom is almost a secondary issue. The primary issue is how much is the government likely to assess them as owing the state through what the state will allege or imply were ill-gotten gains. In other words, a sweetheart arrangement between this ministry or that ministry having to do with land sales primarily, or very undervalued land sales that were granted to an individual with connections, with influence. Money does talk worldwide, does it not? In exchange for that individual agreeing to build this particular shopping mall, or this high-rise apartment building, or this multi-mixed-use commercial residential dwelling, and perhaps in exchange for one of the floors or one of the units on one of the floors being set aside for the minister's son, or the minister's wife family, something of that nature. This happens all over the world. But here you find a very bold crown prince. He's 32 years old, seeking to consolidate power. I mean, critics would call it a power grab, but if you're trying to be a little bit more objective and clinical detached here, a consolidation of power, because he has not one of the most bold visionary development plans afoot. It is the most bold development plan in the modern history of Saudi Arabia. And when there are bold reformist development strokes, there are lots of people who are perfectly content with the way things are. Do not rock the boat would be their request. And in rocking the boat to reform and to develop, there's going to be pushback.
Right.
And this reformist measure is so bold that, of course, there will be pushback, and there's already been pushback. And so in order to enhance the prospect that he's likely to succeed or be effective in accomplishing his goal, he is trying to curb dissent before dissent gets out of hand, or before dissent becomes so energy draining and sucking all the air out of the room that all of a sudden important development goals have been missed or delayed or canceled or fallen behind. If you look at it from that context, it makes sense. Secondly, any government worldwide that takes a stand against corruption is going to have people cheering and applauding from one end of that country to the other.
Right.
What government, in one degree or another, is not alleged to be corrupt, or with sweetheart deals and favoritism and nepotism and the like? And ours is certainly not removed or remote from that. So this has helped to strengthen his position there, as it would strengthen any government's position that would take a credible stand against corruption.
So when do you see the transition of power actually taking place in Saudi Arabia, Dr. Anthony?
No one knows the answer to that other than the father who has the power now and the son who would be the recipient of the transfer.
Right.
And anyone who would tell you otherwise is smoking something there. But it is likely, more than likely, it is a near certainty now, because he has sidelined all of the competitors, all of the credible competitors. That, of course, can be a competitor unknown who is an assassin or heads a coup attempt in many countries. That's not likely to occur in this instance. A, there's no precedent for it. B, many would say, where is the need for it? No one is calling for it or crying out for it. And three, the large numbers, count them in the millions. There's no poll or statistician who's come up with a number there, who want to give this young, bold, ambitious, assertive prince his due and allow him to show whether or not he can achieve the impossible dream. These three things are in his favor. But the father is well into his 80s.
Right.
And like many who are well into their 80s, they're not spring chickens. They're not running the 100-yard dash anymore these days. And so it's not imminent necessarily, but it could happen any day or any hour from this point forward, John. Any other answer, it would be speculation, game-saying, and irresponsible.
So bottom line, Dr. Anthony, for the Saudis, this 32-year-old, very ambitious prince sidelines his competitors through his corruption probe that nobody can argue with because there is corruption there. So he takes them out via his probe. Everybody cheers it. And along with that, he's got a creative financing way to solve the deficit by shaking them down for part of the wealth that they potentially earned through the corruption to go back to the Saudi treasury to make up for the deficit they have because of the lower oil prices. I mean, if you just kind of frame it that way as a layman, that seems like this guy is pretty smart.
Two different things here, John, and it's of course it's tempting to link the two, but they're two different things. The anti-corruption stance, that cuts across all ages, all sectors, all classes, all elites and non-elites who are deemed to have been tainted in terms of how they obtained their wealth. The sidelining of competitors, that's something quite separate. That is to say, until this year, the pattern of rule and reign and governance in Saudi Arabia has been familial through and amongst different branches. There are a total of 5 branches of the ruling family now. And there were 2 remaining branches that theoretically and potentially could have replaced him, or at least indicated, whoa, fellow, you're going too fast, or you're riding roughshod over my prerogatives, on top of which I happen to be older than you and far more experienced than you, and I have my own grassroots supportive network inside and outside the family there. That's what he's done in terms of sidelining his competitors. The corruption thing, yes, of course, they are monetarily his competitors, and some of them are princes who are beholden to some of the princes in a different line of the family than his. So what he's done is taken the remaining 2 heads of rival branches, and he has dismissed them from their positions. So there is no longer any competition from within the ruling family. That's a first.
And astute, if looking to consolidate, if you will, power. All right, we're going to take a phone call from one of our listeners for Dr. John Duke Anthony. Glenn in Chesapeake. Glenn, you're on the air with Dr. John Duke Anthony. What's your question, Glenn?
Yes, sir. There's been a report that the Mandalay shooting was an attempt to take out some of the higher-up Saudi officials that were staying in the MGM Grand Hotel. Do you think this is a bogus report, or can you shed any light on it? The reason I'm asking is, really, the press has not covered the Mandalay shooting very, very closely, and it seems to be something that's been hushed up. Can you elaborate, please?
Absent further information, Glenn, I find any credence in that. On any given day in any number of hotels in Las Vegas and other hot spots, flesh spots, entertainment industry spots in the world, you will find members of ruling classes, the elites, monarchies, and high rollers, you name it. And just because there was an act of violence in one of them, when in fact there may have also been in that same hotel some high rollers from another country or a monarchy, I would subscribe that, chalk it up to coincidence, absent anything further. And what you have said is the first time I've heard that. But I'm not surprised. All kinds of dots are connected by people in their minds or in the media or in their fantasies, when in fact that's exactly what they are, disconnected dots.
All right. I want to thank Glenn for that great question. And Dr. John Duke Anthony, the founding president and chief executive officer of the National Council on U.S.-Arab Relations. We thank you, sir, for your time today and sharing that. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. As you know, the President Trump, the first international trip that he took started in Saudi Arabia. He's got a great relationship with the Saudis, and he's worked on that. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And the Saudis, obviously, a very long-standing ally of the United States, and that has been further enhanced by their relationship with President Trump at this time.
Eight decades and counting, yes.
8 decades of a relationship with the U.S.-Saudi relationship today, stronger than ever, no question. Dr. Anthony, we're out of time. I want to wish you and your lovely bride a very happy Thanksgiving. I want to thank you for inviting me into your home last week. We had a good time.
So well, all the best to you and your family too, John.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great holiday. John Fredericks Radio Network.